Hey, happy Friday, Patreons. Welcome to another Q&A. There's a bunch of really cool questions, so I'm just going to jump right into it. Okay, first up is a couple from Firebrand X. First, he just wanted to chime in and say that in his research, the digital mods for consoles, especially the SNES stuff that he's done, is way better, in his opinion, than any of the analog. It still, at the end of the day, comes down to preference, but I agree 100%. If I had a choice, I would use digital out for everything. You can't use it for Super Game Boy, and you can't use it for the MSU1 audio hacks, but you can for everything else. So I'm definitely a big fan of the optical mod for SNES, and I have a box of parts to do them for other consoles. I just never got around to it, but I planned on doing it to at the least the Saturn and I think the 3DO. So one of these days I'll get around to that. And he also had a question, now that a lot of us have the same scope, am I interested in doing a repository of scope plots for measuring levels? Yeah, absolutely. So step one for this website is just to get it launched, which is essentially the same as the current RetroRGB, but with news posts and people can contribute. The contributions still are going to have to get filtered through me just because of the way it's set up, but it's a good start, I think, at least. And then from there, yeah, eventually I really want to switch over. I mean, it's going to be months now, but I want to switch back to that idea of having one community site that's separate from all the other sites. You know, I don't want it part of Reddit. I don't want it part of GitHub. I want something completely self-sustaining and separate that could be controlled by the people that use it, because it's just you know, I probably sound paranoid by saying this, but I have a feeling GitHub's going to change in about a year, just like when Microsoft ruins everything else. So I want something that I know would be just by nerds for nerds. So yeah, but you know, save all those scope plots. We'll find some way to integrate them. And I really love that more people are starting to use scopes to try to figure out what's going on, because even if you don't really know, like myself, if you don't really know what the scope is doing and you don't have the full grasp that an electrical engineer does, simply having the tools and taking the time to take the measurements is still more than most people have been able to do for a long time. So now that we have a scope that's somewhat affordable and good enough to do analog video, yeah, hell yeah, I can't wait for more people to throw their scope plots in and all of us just have raw, solid data to go by. Doug Gulich had a question about using the HD Retrovision cables with his one-chip SNES. He wants to know if he should still do the brightness attenuation mod or just use the switch on the HD Retrovision cables. And in my testing, just using the switch, especially through the OSSC as you're doing, you're going to get a really, really great picture. You don't have to worry about anything. It's going to be excellent. And at the very least, it's still going to be a large jump over using a 2-chip. That being said, if you want to do any mods to the SNES, I would do all of them, because opening up the SNES, you know, ordering the parts from DigiKey or whatever, you're going to spend more in shipping than you are on parts. So if you're going to do any mods, I would go nuts. You know, look into a cap replacement, do the 7805 replace it with the 78S05, replace the ghosting cap and the power circuit cap. Basically just do everything that you can, because we're talking about, you know, just a few dollars more worth of parts. So if you haven't opened it up yet, your setup is perfectly fine. But if you do end up opening it, I would go nuts and do everything, and then put the HD Retrovision switch back to the way it was. But yeah, as is, it's a perfectly good solution. David Kenyon was asking what temperature he should leave his soldering station on while working on retro consoles. And at the moment, he said he's leaving it at 550 Fahrenheit, which is about 289 Celsius. And that's a little on the lower side, but if that's working for you, I would just leave well enough alone. I set mine to about 330 C, but I don't have a great soldering station, and the tips and wand aren't great either. So I'm wondering if the efficiency of the wand is why I need, or the lack of efficiency is why I need to turn mine up. But that's a perfectly good temperature. I just wouldn't go crazy. Just keep in mind, if you're ever desoldering things like an RF box or large pieces of metal, you're probably going to have to turn that up quite significantly. I think for one metal shielding that was soldered on, even using a big tip, you know, flux, making sure the tip was clean, I think I still had to turn mine up to like 400 C. But that's not for wire soldering. That was just removing a big heat shield. So keeping it around 550 Fahrenheit should be fine for you. Just the bigger stuff you solder to, you might have to start turning it up a little bit more. Steven Salvatore had a good one. He asked, do I think CRTs should have continued to be made in conjunction with LCD TVs? Would HDR have been better with them and features like that? He thinks there's still a place for CRTs if they were continued to be made and progressed. So, it might be surprising to some, but I think that CRTs ran its course and it just cost way too much to manufacture, ship, and maintain those things versus something like an LED or an OLED. And when it comes to high definition content, my OLED TV blows away every CRT on the planet. The reason that I'm still a massive fan of CRTs is for content that was designed to be watched on CRTs. So any 4:3 made for TV broadcast is always going to look better because you have the horizontal and vertical scan lines kind of cutting through the image. Whereas when you put those on a really high-end TV, you see all of the flaws. Also, those things were calibrated on CRTs, so it's just, it's really the way it was meant to be viewed, I guess, is the best way to put it. So while I don't think that CRTs should have been made as much and continued to be made along with other panels, I do wish there was at least one or two companies still making them. Even if it was only just a specialty thing, because arcade machines will never look right with an LCD panel. You can get the lag down to 0. At the moment, you can get scan lines looking okay. Maybe in the future, with 4K scalers, we could have some vertical scan lines in there as well. But it's never going to look quite the same. It's just impossible to emulate the exact look. So for arcades, for games, and for people who like older TV content, CRTs might actually be the better choice. And I did that video a while back with Scott, and we're going to do a follow-up on that at some point about watching a movie on my D32 BVM versus the OLED. And this time I'd like to get some of the new cameras I have and really just kind of show comparisons. And so people, it's never going to be as good as in person, but I would really like to demonstrate the difference for things like games and movies. But it was a cool question, but I just wish somebody was still reliably making very high quality ones. And I think there's only a few people out there, and I think it's basically just people who take new old stock of tubes, which is almost non-existent anymore, and building out of those. The Real Phoenix had a couple of cool questions. First, he asked if I was going to do a page on superguns and proper signal attenuation. I want so badly to be able to do that. I'm still doing at least 40 hours on the website and video stuff. I'm still trying to get everything moved over. I'm still unpacking. I'm mostly there though. Hopefully I'll have like a room tour soon enough, but I'm getting there. But, and I'm also lucky enough to live in a place where I could hop on a train and go down to iFix Arcade and have some amazing people that hang out down there, like the owner Chris, Jose, Beast, who will allow me to go with my scope and start testing stuff. So, in fact, a buddy of mine, Sabin Arturo, invited me over to his place with the scope to test a few of his boards as well. So I really want to start doing that. When I do the testing with Sabin, I'll make sure to save pictures of all the scope stuff. And I do want to put a page on there soon. There's not enough hours in a day. So hopefully I can open the site up soon enough so other people could start contributing. And then of course, eventually all of that public work will get spun off into the wiki that I've been talking about forever. But yeah, absolutely. I think that would be a very huge help. Next, you asked about will there ever be an official forum or Discord for Retro RGB or the Retro Roundtable? And he wants to have, because there's been lots of interesting conversations with people throughout things like Twitter, which you can't really have a full conversation on. He even dropped Electron Ash's name, which I'm really hoping to get Ash on on my interviews for the podcast at some point soon. And if I end up in England, I would love to just go invade his space and go hang out with him for a couple hours, because I've been talking to him for a while, and I'm a fan of his work. He's got a bunch of amazing projects, and I would love to just sit there and pick his brain. So maybe someday I'll come for you, Ash. And about the official forum and Discord, to be honest, for me to put my name on something like that, I would have to feel comfortable that myself or other people or a combination of people were there positively policing it at all times, because every forum I've ever been to, every Discord channel I've ever been to, ends up eventually devolving to the same handful of people do 90% of the posts. If you disagree with them, you get ganged up on, and it's all just toxic and horrible. There's still a few forums left that are really great, where the level of toxicity is lower than the others. But I would not be able to tolerate that. And I know this is a personal issue of my own. I know this is me not able to cope, but the truth is, I grew up AOL Instant Messenger era, so it was before everybody else had this. So I still grew up in a place where when I acted like an asshole, I got punched in the face for it. I had to deal with the consequences of my actions, and I'm totally cool with that. I think that's how it should be. So I still get really annoyed and pissed and frustrated when some of these forums get amazingly toxic, because people know that they have no accountability for it. And it really drives me crazy, and I don't feel good being a part of any of that. And I've already seen a lot of the discords turn into the exact same thing. I jokingly defended myself on one last week or something, and immediately people were telling me to stop causing trouble when other people were shitting on me, and I was just playfully poking back. So I don't want to be a part of that. I love constructive criticism. So many people that have posted very harsh criticisms were right, and I learned from them, and I enjoy that. Sometimes people post criticisms because they don't know the whole side of the story. That's annoying, but it's not their fault. I love stuff like that. I love good feedback. I love great discussions where people disagree but then figure it out at the end. We've had so many amazing discoveries just in the nerd world, a nerd like retro gaming world because of that. But it's very often not like that. It's very often you go in and because you're not the same 3 people ruling the roost, you're not allowed to do anything. So I have a hard time dealing with that, and I know that's, like I said, it's my personal issue. But there's so many amazing forums out there already where they try to keep the drama down. They're not as policed as I would have liked, and some people still really enjoy the picking on drama side. So I would love to do an official Discord or an official forum if I knew that I could trust a bunch of people to help out and make sure that it's a place that everybody could feel safe, and that people are very quickly thrown into timeout if they act like dicks for any reason. So I guess that was probably way too long an answer, but I just wanted to be open and honest about it, because a lot of people had asked about why do you not have a forum yet, or what happened to the Retro Roundtable Discord. That was an unofficial Discord, that wasn't us, and that went toxic immediately. So I I would really want it to be a safe and happy, upbeat place where arguments were polite and welcomed, not just a bunch of people being assholes. John Foster was asking about my thoughts on my LG OLED TV, and to skip to the end, it's by far the best TV I've ever owned, and I've been lucky enough to own some amazing ass TVs. For whatever insane reason, have always been in the right place at the right time when buying these things. So over the years, I was able to get a Luva Aconda, a Luva Articos, a Panasonic Plasma, one of the first 3D ones that was professionally calibrated, and now this one. And I could say that as much as I've loved all of those TVs and really appreciated them, this blows them all away. Lag has been consistently under 2 frames every time I've tested. Never over, no matter what method I use or what console or resolution. I think it's mostly close to a frame, but with display lag, you never really, I don't think you could put a solid number on every scenario. So I'm comfortable saying definitely under 2 frames. Hopefully I could figure out how to tweak it, or maybe a firmware update will come out so I can get it closer to a frame. I turn all of my settings off, everything. So, all of that noise reduction, picture enhancement, all of it's off. And a little trick is, at least on my model, every resolution, every HDR on and off, all those things require you to reset the settings on every input, which is great because you could tune the TV the way you like it. I think even some of the experts like some of that processing on 480i and 480p TV sources, but not on any of the high def. It's really all just preference, but I turn them all off on everything. And the only other thing that I wanted to do but haven't yet was a friend of mine has one of those automatic calibration things. So you punch in the model of your TV, you hook it up to your computer, you sit this calibration camera in front of it, and it tells you what settings to change. I want to do that now that I'm settled into the new place and I know the TV is going to be where it sits for the foreseeable future. So I'll post all of my settings, including the sharpness, which you asked about, as soon as I do that, but that's probably like a month away. So Overall, if you have the extra money to spend and you could find a good deal on them, I couldn't recommend these TVs enough. They're the best I've ever used. And there's still great lower cost alternatives. The TCLs I think have been great. But if you want quality, as far as I'm concerned, based on what I've seen, this is as good as it gets. John Foster had one more thing that I didn't see until after I hit stop on the last one, about the LG OLED stuff. I set all of my game inputs to PC mode. So I have one HDMI in that's set to PC and then an HDMI switch going into that. And that helps set the TV to the highest range RGB mode 444. The black level setting, I forgot what I have it on, but you could tell pretty easily if it's set to the wrong one, because black screens will look gray and almost like they have jail bars, not solid black. So that should just be a quick thing that you could eyeball. But once again, I'll post all my settings when I have it professionally calibrated and I could double check everything. Eric Hurley asked, what would I recommend for a distribution amp to send RGB to numerous PVMs, CRTs, processors, whatever? I think, to be honest, I think an Extron Crosspoint would probably be your best bet because you can get them really cheap. You said you're already using a G-SCART switch. So while it would be nice to find a distribution amp, that might be more expensive than just getting a 8x4 Crosspoint and just leaving it only on one input, so G-SCART switch into that, and then letting those 4 outputs determine where you want it to go to. I think depending on your use though, I mean, I'm obviously a massive fan of the G-SCART switch. Depending on your use case and how your setup's going to be, switching to all Crosspoint, so everything is just BNC cables, might be the better way to go. But it really just depends. I think if I were to do another setup where I plugged in every console I had, I would still keep all of my RGB cables for testing or for when going directly into a monitor, but I would have console to BNC cables into a 32 port Crosspoint so I could wire everything I have together. But other than that, I mean, I would just try eBay and see what you could find, but you might just end up with a Crosspoint. And I think even the 8x8s I've seen for like 40 bucks. So I don't think you could find a distribution amp for 40 bucks. And that does a good job. So, hope that pointed you in the right direction. Oleus asked, any thoughts on the PSIO? That's the device that plugs into older model PlayStation 1s and lets you run games from the SD card. A lot of the firmware updates have fixed tons of issues, so as far as I know, it's running pretty well at the moment. It is expensive, but the alternative of getting a new laser, getting it calibrated with a scope, and then burning optical media and making sure that you use the best optical media, the best discs, and you get the best burner. At the end of the day, it's just much better, in my opinion, to try an SD solution. My only beef with them is that they already had a product, it's definitely working, everything was fine, and now it's taking years to fill orders that they've already taken. So, this is obviously a common thing, and anytime you have a small group of people, or sometimes just one person doing a project by themselves, but it really bugs me because it's already a product that's proven to be working, so why can't you just order more? And Nick from HD Retrovision always flips out when I say that, because then you have to find a way to support it, you have to find a way to deal with all the extra emails and sales and all that stuff. I get it, but I think a year and a half is a little bit excessive to wait for an order. I ordered mine, I think it was last May or last June. I ordered another one, and I think it's not even going to ship until September or something like that. So it's a little ridiculous, and that's my only beef with it is, although it's kind of shitty of me to say that because I know nothing about the company, their situation, something about the drama that happened right before it. All I know is you had a product that worked that you were selling. You shouldn't take a year and a half to fill orders. So that's my only beef with it. I'm sure I'll get a lot of hate posts because of that. It usually happens whenever I talk about those situations, but because I've done manufacturing with companies before, I see all of the hard work behind the scenes that many people don't see, but I also see that you could very easily have shipped all of these orders months ago if they were going through the right channels, especially because they took pre-order money. So, sorry if that pisses anybody off, but that's just my thoughts. James Evans Turner asked, do JP21 devices expect the same sync levels you'd have with attenuated C-Sync through Euroscart? Yeah, I believe they both use composite video as sync, so you need to send C-Sync down the line, which should be the same voltage. Good question, though. Clint Collage had 2 questions. First, he wants to know what's best practiced for cartridge-based consoles. Do you leave the cartridges in when they're not in use, or do you take them out? And to be honest, I really have no idea. I vaguely remember debating this, and I don't think anybody ever came to a definitive conclusion. Maybe consoles like the Jaguar would be better off with the cartridge left in because it's exposed and you don't want dust to build up. Maybe having pressure on the pins at all times hurts things. I really don't know, and that's probably a good question for the Retro Roundtable. Maybe we could battle over that next time. And second, you asked about HDMI switches. At the moment, I've only had a chance to try 2. The one auto switch I have is junk. Even though it has a remote and it allows you to go manual, every time you lose the signal, it goes back to the first port, and then you have to go and manually select it again. It's annoying. I've also tried a StarTech one, I think that was the brand, and it didn't output audio at all. I think mine must have been defective, but I mean, I tried everything. So I'm going to keep looking. You know, I think what I want doesn't exist because I want a device with a bunch of different features. So I think I really need to end up getting, you know, a 5x1 or higher HDMI switch, then put that through a splitter, and then have one go through into my capture card and the other into the TV, which is essentially what I'm doing now. I just, you know, once I discover a switch that I really like, I'll let everybody know. And the 2 that you suggested, the SwitchDeck 4K 5x1 and Monoprice Blackbird 4K Pro, I'll try to get to those eventually, and hopefully I could order them from a place where I could return it if they don't work for me. Eric Neil Ross had a couple questions about converters. First, he wanted to know if there's any good component to HDMI converters. And the ones that I've used have been perfect because it just digitizes the signal. It doesn't change the signal at all. So it's 0 lag, which I have tested with actual measurements, not just guessed. The only thing is, as long as it's 480i and above, 240p always acts funky with some of these converters. But I would just get the cheapest one Amazon has and see how it works for you, and it should be fine. I got the one that's in, you know, the generic little blue and black case, and I never had any issues with mine. And the other question was, do I know of any RGB SCART to S-video converters so that maybe you're using one on a flat screen, but you want to use an S-video tube TV. It's a good idea, but I've actually not really done any research on that. And as far as I know, a lot of these converters fail for games because they don't understand what 240p is. So if you were to use just the TV source like 480i and output to S, you know, from RGB to S video, it would work fine. But as soon as you feed it at 240p, like you mentioned through Genesis and Super Nintendo, it might not. Or it might treat it as 480i, which would look awful, and trust me, you don't even want to go down that road. So you had mentioned 2 other ones, one from NEAV that did not work for you, and then another one that you'd looked at and you weren't sure if it was going to work or not. I mean, it's a lot of money. It's almost $100 to test something like that out. If you're willing to do it, let me know. I'll certainly post the results, but I would keep low expectations for that just because of the 240p side. Matt Fritz asked, what are the best BNC to RCA adapters? I will put the links in the Patreon description. It's the ones that Steve recommended in the scope video, and they fit a lot better. So sometimes on the cheap ones, they could kind of wiggle around and then you get flicker on the screen, which is a big deal if you're using a scope because then you wouldn't be able to get a good reading. So I'll definitely post the links below for those. They're very expensive though, so just take a deep breath before you take a look at the price. But if you're having issues with yours, it's certainly worth upgrading. All right, well, that's it for this week. Thank you so much to everybody that participated. I really enjoyed doing these, so please keep them coming. Any questions that you have, post down below in the Patreon page, not on the YouTube page, and I'll get to those next week. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time.